Dr. Joseph, Dr. Kalyan Rao, Gopalji, and Shaila, Lakshmanan, and others, I'm suddenly assailed by a sense of inadequacy because, you know, the vast experience that Professor Joseph and Dr. Kalyan Rao have. I'm feeling slightly nervous, but I'll try and put before you some thoughts about what I think are some of the important challenges currently facing us. And because universities are on the front line of repression as well as resistance, I can do no better than to quote Edward Said, who in 1999 delivered a lecture in the University of Cairo, which was titled "On the University." And if you were to read it today, I mean, you'll feel. I mean, it's quite eerie to read it because it's almost like he was talking about India today. You know, what is academic freedom? What is intellectual freedom? What does it mean to pursue intellectual thought? And who is trying to control and coerce academicians? And he writes that academic freedom, there's something hallowed and consecrated about the academy. Oh, sorry. And rather than viewing the search for coercion and control over others, we should regard knowledge as something for which risks must be taken. And we should think of academic freedom as an invitation to explore knowledge. And then he goes on to lament because he's talking about colonization, post-independent Arab universities, but he's also drawing parallels from US and other places. And then he goes on to lament that the true education has been short-circuited, and universities have become the proving ground for earnest patriots. You know this, and he says that the national universities have often been conceived as extensions of the newly established national security state. And I think that is precisely what we are witnessing today. And it's not a new thing, of course, in the US. One has seen in the McCarthy era how academicians were called out for being left or pro-Soviet and so on and so forth, and they were persecuted and many were driven out of jobs. And up till this date, the Defense Department is one of the biggest funders of research projects and research grants in the US universities. And this is something that is what is kind of unfolding before us. Universities as proving grounds for patriots. Are you patriotic enough or not? That is at the heart of what we've seen the last few days. But also the way in which the universities are sought to be discredited as centers of knowledge production, which will then feed into our ideas of what India should be like. So universities are to be held up only as examples of or objects of hate and derision, not as producers of knowledge which will tell us what India should look like, what a welfare state should look like, what our policies should be. And simultaneously you will see, it's been a process which has been going on for a while now, but you will see the rise of the think tanks, on policy issues. Of course, the most important think tank these days is the two think tanks run by the Dole father and son, the Dole duo. Vivekananda Foundation, which every important significant posting in the government today is from the Vivekananda Foundation, but also the India Foundation, which is run by the younger Dole, Shaurya Dole I think his name is, who organizes conferences on a variety of themes, including his national conferences, All India conferences on counter-terrorism, where you will find a motley crowd of people, including representatives of arms companies, RSS pracharaks, government ministers, and of course Sri Ravi Shankar. And they will tell us what the policy the government should follow on a variety of themes. And some of the regular fixtures are like people like Tariq Fateh and so on and so forth. But we've been seeing for a while that this whole idea of the national security state, which Edward Said was lamenting about, which brings together a wide variety of players. You have these sort of think tanks, these talking heads, then you have the media, which is playing a very important role. So it's not by way of coincidence that you have a show almost every night with big mustachioed ex-generals sitting on TV debates, shouting down the other Pakistani generals and so on. And plus you have these corporate heads. So in fact, in 2009, right after what is called the 26/11, the Mumbai carnage, FICCI, the Forum for Corporate Heads, held a conference on counterterrorism, and they were to formulate a paper or a policy for the government as to what it should do to counter terrorism. And it said things like, basically quoting the 9/11 report of the US, saying that, oh, we are not any longer living in a very safe world, so we have to take some hard decisions, and so on and so forth. Apart from the fact that it kind of salivated about how much money could be made out of, defense projects, the barbed wiring on the Indo-Bangla border, the number of, different kinds of projects, how much money that would throw up, but also it had a recommendation for the government as to what to do with civil society. So it said, they must be told that they have to, and constantly the reference was Israel, that just like in Israel, the civil society will, the job of the civil society, in its view, the FICCI's view, was to go out and project the government's views to the people, to make them kind of pliant citizens, and it said that civil society must be taught to bring to people the projects of the government or the policies of the government and so on and so forth. And then it goes on to say that if they don't fall in line, of course they must be all put in jail or some such thing. I mean, to that effect, that was a recommendation. And then it goes on to say that hard times ask for hard decisions. So there must be laws on wiretapping, on surveillance, and so on and so forth. The anti-terror law must be changed, and even if it is against the constitution, these acts, these kind of actions must follow. Even if they fall foul of our democratic ethos, these actions must follow. So that was the kind of recommendation that FICCI was giving. And no doubt some of them would have fed into the policy decisions and will do so now. So what we basically, we see that this whole national security state coming together, congealing, which constantly, of course, needs the hype and paranoia and fear to keep it floating. And in this national security state, all those who either differ or who do not fall in line have to be kind of identified, isolated, quarantined, and immobilized, if not eliminated altogether. And this sort of discourse, this kind of language, this kind of justifications for a hard state, harsh terror laws, off with their heads, put them under sedition laws, they don't say Bharat Mata ki Jai, and so on and so forth. All of this is unfortunately not simply a part of our public discourse, but kind of seeps down into even the judicial discourse, quite sadly. For instance, the bail order for Kanhaiya, JNSU president, while granting bail, I mean, it's quite it's funny in ways. It would be really funny if it weren't so tragic. But if you look at the text of the order and the final decision, that is of granting bail, there is no connection between the two. And I just want to read out a couple of paragraphs from the bail order to just show how there is this fetishization of the national security argument. So the order read that in para 41 it says, suffice it to note that such persons, meaning Kanhaiya and Shaila and others, enjoy the freedom to raise such slogans in the comfort of university campus, but without realizing that they are in this safe environment because our forces are there at the battlefield, situated at the highest altitude of the world, where even the oxygen is so scarce that those who are shouting anti-national slogans close to may not even be able to withstand those conditions for an hour even. The kind of slogans raised may have demoralizing effect on the family of those martyrs who returned home in coffin draped in tricolor. The petitioner has also to be reminded that under Article 51A of the Constitution of India, fundamental duties of every citizen have been specified along with the fact that rights and duties are two sides of the same coin. So this is a very typical ruse of conservatives, that, okay, you got your rights, but A, there are reasonable restrictions on your rights, and B, that there are, don't forget the duties. As though the core of the Constitution is not about our rights as citizens or about the limitations on the power of the state, but fundamentally about being censored beings in this country. But neither restrictions nor these duties actually extinguish our rights. the Constitution exists fundamentally to preserve our rights against the might of the state. Of course, then the bail order goes on to give advisory to teachers of JNU as to how they must teach, what they must, tell the students in order to be good citizens, almost subjects, not just citizens. And then it goes on. I mean, just look at the terminology that is used. It says that the thoughts reflected in the slogans raised by some of the students of JNU who organized and participated in that program cannot be claimed to be protected as fundamental right to speech of freedom and expression, which is, I mean, factually incorrect, legally speaking incorrect, because there is enough case law which says that mere shouting of slogans does not constitute sedition. The judge goes on to say, I consider this as a kind of infection from which students are suffering, which needs to be controlled or cured before it becomes an epidemic. Whenever some infection is spread in a limb, effort is made to cure the same by giving antibiotics. If that does not work, by following second line of treatment. Sometimes it may require surgical intervention also. However, if the infection results in infecting the limb to the extent that it becomes gangrene, amputation is the only treatment. But then she says, I'm going to be very generous and I'm going to recommend conservative method of treatment. I mean, one doesn't know what she means by amputation, death sentence probably. That's the kind of reasoning or lack of reasoning that one sees in judicial orders these days. But the trouble is that, if you look at the political discourse, you find that there is a kind of a increasingly this kind of theorization that there is an underground, meaning the jihadists, the Maoists and whatever, and then you have the overground, which is all of us practically. The master of this theory is of course Arun Jaitley, who in 2002, first time he theorized this, saying that, and this was after the Ansal Plaza encounter in Delhi. I don't know if you are familiar with that at all, but the special cell of Delhi police claimed that it had killed Pakistani terrorists in the basement of this very popular shopping mall, the Ansal Plaza. And but there was a doctor, an Ayurvedic doctor if I'm right, who was present in the basement at that time, and he said that he saw the special cell people bringing these boys in the car, and they seemed to be either drugged or sleeping, and then they were shot in cold blood. So there was this whole hangama about it, and petitions were filed with the NHRC and so on by Kuldeep Nayyar and Prof. Bidwai. And at that time, Arun Shourie had said that these people, these human rights wallahs who are making this big noise and fuss about the Ansal Plaza encounter are merely the overground face of these, of these terrorists. And it's also interesting that he said this just before the Independent Citizens Tribunal report about the 2002 Gujarat pogrom was about to be released. So it was a nice way of, delegitimizing the entire civil society. He said this again and again. I mean, he said this repeatedly, and in 2010 again, when Amit Shah was arrested for the Sohrabuddin encounter, he said the same thing again, that these human rights activists are basically the overground face of the underground. And he goes on to say, I'm surely he must be given a basic textbook of political science. He says that these civil society people who are unelectable, who can never win elections, and we call them civil society. They are unelectable, they cannot win any elections, and we call them the civil society, as though the premise of civil society is that you have to win elections. And he said this is the tyranny of the unelectables. I mean, it's ironical that Arun Jaitley says that, the tyranny of the unelectable, considering that he couldn't even win an election even when there was a huge wave in favor of the BJP. But, so he goes on to say, that there is this overground and underground continuum. But be sure that this is an argument to erode, our citizens' rights. But as I was saying, not only does it receive support in judicial reasoning on many occasions, but actually it's kind of institutionalized in our law as well. If you look at laws like, for example, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, what does it say? It says basically that somebody could be tried for supporting an organization which is banned, not participating in an activity which is directly detrimental to anything. But I mean, the ambit is so wide. If you look at the way in which unlawful activity itself is defined, that is any action or any word, whether written, spoken, visible sign, representation, which threatens or is likely to threaten, or which is intended to threaten or likely to intend to threaten the unity and sovereignty or integrity of the country, falls under this wide ambit of unlawful. So, Kabir Kala Manch which sings songs, unlawful. Sai Baba who talks about Operation Green Hunt, unlawful. Students who talk about anything except for looking for a job, unlawful. Dr. Saibal Jana, who has been treating Adivasi patients for last 30 years free of cost, unlawful. Why? I mean, he was picked up recently. He was arrested in a 30-year-old case earlier this month, and arrested and taken to the police station with handcuffs, and he's just been released a few days ago. But I mean, what is possibly the logic of this? Now, if you look at Sai Baba, for example, 90% disabled, unable to tie to the wheelchair, unable to get up, unable to do basic functions of every day without support. He was first in jail for almost 1 year. First, his arrest was hardly an arrest. It was actually an abduction. He was on his way back to his home from university, and he was picked up on the way back by the ATS, the Maharashtra ATS, and taken and flung from place to place. I mean, imagine the plight of this man. He's flung from place to place, from jail, kept in under cell. For 1 year, he was denied bail thrice. Twice by the Gadchiroli Sessions Court, once by the Nagpur bench of the High Court. Why? And why was Sheetal Sate was 8 months pregnant when she voluntarily surrendered, denied bail. I mean, what possibly could be, the logic, even though, I mean, the fact is that there is enough case law to say that unless a person actively involves in, because courts have on occasion tried to read down these sorts of laws, and yet we find that there is, this whole paranoia of national security sweeping in and really eroding the rights of the citizens. Now, when Arundhati writes a piece called Prisoner of War, which many of you may have read in the Outlook, when the Nagpur bench denied bail to Sai Baba, and thereafter he was granted bail, of course, but the Nagpur bench, when the hearing was on at the Nagpur bench again, in front of a new judge, because that judge had been by then gone off to the Bombay bench. Now this judge says that not only must Sai Baba be brought immediately back to the jail. I mean, what sort of security threat was this 90% physically disabled man posing to the Indian state, that he had to be brought back immediately within 3 or 4 days or whatever, 48 hours, back to under cell? And also contempt proceedings against Arundhati must be instituted. Why? Because she has said she has a game plan, according to the court. She has a game plan of getting bail for Sai Baba. As though in a democratic country you cannot campaign, you cannot agitate, you cannot demand from the courts that a 90% disabled man who has not been accused of anything more than writing letters, that is the prosecution's own charge sheet. I mean, it's not a point that we are saying. The prosecution has argued that he was writing letters. That's maximum case built against him. That he must be brought back immediately, and Arundhati has written that he must be released. This is a game plan, and she has also accused the court of granting bail to Babu Bajrangi and to Maya Kodnani, who have been convicted. Here is a man who has only been charge sheeted for writing letters, supposedly to Maoist leaders. And how dare Arundhati compare this great menace to Indian state with Babu Bajrangi and Maya Kodnani, who have been convicted of participating in a massacre which killed 97 people. Children, young, old, women, men. So there is, according to the court, I mean, it's atrocious that, Arundhati does this. So the court calls her boorish, arrogant, exploiting the good-natured and good sense of our country, who is exploiting, in the name of freedom of speech, is exploiting the situation. So, according to the judge, she has scandalized the court, and it amounts to interfering in the administration. So, saying that please give bail to a 90% disabled man constitutes interfering in the administration of justice and lowering down the image of the judiciary without any basis and with selfish motive.
No. Yeah.
So this prima facie constitutes criminal contempt, and therefore it is a fit case where an order of issuance of notice for criminal contempt against the author Arundhati Roy is required to be made. So, I mean, that is what we are actually looking at today. And in this sort of creation of the national security state, we can see a kind of a, public-private partnership, if one may call that. For example, there is one actor, which is of course the media. Coming back to the JNU issue, I don't know if you were following the news coverage around that initially, where Umar Khalid was the enemy number one of the Indian state. He is supposed to have been making calls to Bangladesh, Middle East, Middle East and Bangladesh. 800 calls per day apparently, according to media reports. And then this is it's quite striking that if you follow the stories, they all come on the same day. Everybody suddenly discovers his Jaish-e-Mohammed link on 15th February, all the media channels. On 23rd February, all of them discovered that he has a Maoist link as well. So, Times of India reports, Umar Khalid's Maoist link exposed. How? They look at his Facebook photographs, where he's posted a photograph from last year when Hem Mishra, one of the students of JNU, who was charged with being a Maoist, was released on bail. And Umar Khalid and other friends had gone to receive him in Nagpur. So from that photograph, Times of India suddenly discovered that his Maoist link has been, exposed. So this is not just Times of India, but several other newspapers on the same day. So suddenly, 15 February, everybody has his Islamist links discovered. On 23rd February, everybody discovers his, Maoist link. But there's also something else which is happening, which everybody has been noticing and seeing, which is the stormtroopers phenomena. So you have these stormtroopers who will barge in and kill people, hang people, as happened in Lathar. In Chhattisgarh, what we are seeing is this, the unfolding of this public-private partnership at great and scary level. For example, the Samajik Ekta Manch, which is going around hounding people, as you know, that the phenomenal work that these group of young women lawyers, Jagdalpur Legal Aid Group, were doing in Chhattisgarh, offering legal aid to people who had been in jail, mostly tribals, who had been in jail for years, not even knowing what their crime was, have been hounded out of Chhattisgarh. Several journalists who were daring to write against IG Kalluri, whose writ runs large in that place, have been hounded out. How? You have these bunch of Samajik Ekta people lining up at their homes, telling their landlords not to keep them any longer as tenants. If that doesn't work, then raising slogans against them, bringing out processions against them. If that doesn't work, then throwing stones at their cars and homes. This is the way in which this entire, fright is being created. And people are being hounded like that. And be sure that it's not going to rest in Chhattisgarh alone, it's going to come to our part of the world very soon. Now, what you have, if you were to look at what all of this is doing, the use of this law, the creation of these stereotypes and so on, it is creating, it is kind of marking out everybody who doesn't agree with their idea of India, or their idea of being humans, basically. And that's at one level. The other level is as we've seen in many of the other cases, because national security is ultimately, if you look at it, is tied to also the idea of the other. That we are this nation, we have to protect it from the other, and this other is now increasingly the internal other, which is, to be very open and frank about it, the Muslim. And what you have is, you consolidate the idea of the self, the Hindu nation, the leader as the Hindu Hriday Samrat, and the others as all of these who are trying to poke holes into this, fortress of the Hindu Rashtra. So you must tar the Maoists, you must tar anybody. I mean, Dr. Jaina was hardly a Maoist. He was simply a doctor who was serving the Adivasis. But there is no patience with that sort of thing either. Everybody, teachers, students, activists, everybody is the overground face of the underground. Now, but I would still say that this nationalism, this whole national security debate is a bogeyman. It's a ruse to actually cut down on our rights. It's not even as though the BJP or the RSS is interested or deeply committed to the idea of security for the Indian, for Indians. I mean, you just have to look at 2 or 3 examples, and with that I will end. One is the most recent case of David Headley not coming to India, but testifying in this, being the star approver witness in this 2611 case. As you know, Headley has confessed to doing recce's of sites before the November carnage, and he is therefore one of the prime accused. But the Indian government, in contravention to law, now Article 3, Section 306 CRPC is very clear as to who can turn an approver. The person has to be in custody of the investigating in judicial custody or the investigating agency, and before he can be granted pardon. But here is a man who negotiates his pardon. He becomes an approver, negotiates his pardon, gets his pardon with the Indian government with God knows on what terms. We have absolutely no idea. So this is a national security state, which is also a secret state. We have absolutely no idea what terms have been negotiated. But we can be very sure as to what the terms are. I mean, we get an idea about what's been happening since Headley testified. He is an approver in the 2611 case. But what does he talk about? He talks about Ishrat Jahan. Or rather, what is the prosecution interested in him talking about? He's not even talking by himself. It's the prosecution which is leading him up to Ishrat Jahan. Ishrat Jahan was killed in 2006. Or was it 2006? Which is 2.5 years before 2611 happens. He is here to testify about 2611. What is the prosecution's interest in asking him questions about Ishrat Jahan? Now, if you remember, in post-2002 Gujarat, there were a number of fake encounters. Ishrat, Sohrabuddin, Tulsi Prajapati, and Sadiq Jamal, and a host of others. Plus, there were these large number of POTA cases booked against Muslims, and all of these were either, the cases were to do with conspiracies that ISI agents in Gujarat or elsewhere were conspiring to kill Narendra Modi. So there were these huge POTA cases, surge in POTA cases, or there were these so-called assassins coming into Gujarat to kill Narendra Modi. Now, Ishrat Jahan was of course one of them. So in 2009, the Tamang report, the magisterial report says that Ishrat Jahan was an innocent person. She was killed in cold blood. In 2011, the court-appointed special investigation team says Ishrat was killed in cold blood. Thereafter, the High Court orders a CBI inquiry, and the CBI conducts its own investigation, files a charge sheet in court based on several statements by police officers, and it ties together a picture where very clearly there is a high-level conspiracy, though it doesn't go up to Kali Dadi and Safed Dadi, and yet there is ample evidence that it was a conspiracy of a very high level. So why is the prosecution, and it's interesting that the public prosecutor in this case is Mr. Ujjwal Nikam, who has admitted in public that he lied about Kasab asking for biryani. Now, biryani is very special in Indian political discourse. It is a code word. It's not something to be eaten. It's something to be communicated, to be consumed. Right? It's a code word for you know what. So here is a liar of a public prosecutor who's admitted that I lied. And here is a double agent, or possibly a triple agent, or a quadruple agent, God only knows, who has negotiated his terms of pardon, sitting in the US with his lawyers, and just look at the way in which the conversation goes. So Mr. Nikam asks him, "Are you aware of female? Is there a female wing of Jamaat-ud-Dawa?" He says, "Yes, possibly." "Who is the chief of that women's wing?" He says some name, mother of that Abu Ayman or whoever. "Have you heard of a suicide bomber, female suicide bomber?" "No." "Have you heard of a botched up operation?" "Yes, I heard X telling me that he had heard from Y that there was some botched up operation involving some woman." "What was the name of that woman?" "I don't know." "Okay, I will give you three choices. X, Y, Ishrat Jahan." He says, "Oh, Ishrat Jahan." And therefore, you have everybody going, hyperventilating in the press next day, especially Mr. Arnab Goswami, saying, "Now it has been nailed that Ishrat was an LET agent. She had come here to kill Modi. And all these years, you put all these poor policemen, GL Singhal, Vanzara and so on in jail, and poor Amit Shah, and his reputation has been in tatters. It was a political conspiracy to destabilize Modi's political rise." What does it have to do with 26/11? The fact is that report after report, investigation after investigation has showed that Ishrat was killed in cold blood. There are two different issues, whether she was a terrorist or not. That has nothing to do with the fact that she was executed in cold blood. But even so, there is nothing at all to prove that she was an LET agent. Now constantly then there is Mr. Mani, who cried on television saying that he was burnt with cigarettes to produce an affidavit which said that Ishrat, Mr. Mani was the secretary, do I have 2 minutes? So he says that, there is this all this talk that the first affidavit that the UPA filed about Ishrat was that Ishrat was an LET agent, and then it changed its affidavit later on, saying that Ishrat was not an LET agent. Now, but it's very interesting, you can just Google for the affidavits, you'll get PDFs of them floating around on the net. The first affidavit actually says that some media houses reported that Jamaat-ud-Dawa's online website had said that Ishrat was an LET agent. I mean, there is no intelligence input in claiming that Ishrat was an LET agent. It's only and only hearsay and media reporting. And so that, even if the government had not withdrawn that affidavit itself had no legal value or otherwise. No intelligence inputs were there in that. So, but the point is that you are willing to play. Now, 26/11 is possibly the most important trial on terrorism in this country, and yet you are willing to pardon one of the main accused for God knows what terms, and then make him to say things. Up till now he hasn't said much about the other main accused, which is Abu Jindal in the trial. It is mainly focusing on whether Ishrat was LET or not. So we say that, even on this thing which is so sacred to you, this whole business of national security, you're basically lying to us all the time, and you are totally non-serious about the security and safety of this country. Now, one can go on about cases, but I will not here. Just to say that in these times when, words have changed their meanings, lost their meanings, when you have Venkaiah Naidu saying that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty, you do a double take. What does he really mean? But recalling Kannabiran also, who said that we've traveled so far from constitutional democracy that any question of democratic rights seems like a very far-fetched idea. So in these times, I think to restore the sanctity of human rights, sanctity of democratic rights, even in these terrible times where national security discourse seems to have overwhelmed everything else, I think it's most welcome that CPDR Tamil Nadu has been formed. I congratulate them and I offer them their fraternal solidarity.